Emmanuel Forbes and Jamin Davis certainly have a lot to prove, and their NFL futures may very well lay in the balance of this NFL season. But Davis being moved to the edge is about more than just trying to figure it out. It's about trying to maximize his potential. That and more on today's episode of Locked On Commanders.
You are Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This is your daily podcast covering the Washington Commanders, free and available wherever you get podcasts. Remember, you can subscribe for free on YouTube or wherever you are hearing this today. I'm your host, David Harrison, credential member of the media covering the Washington Commanders for CommanderGameDay.com, a part of Sports Illustrated, here with you every Monday through Friday. Greatly appreciate you for coming through for this episode every dayers. You already know, but I'm going to tell you anyway. I appreciate you coming through every day. On today's episode, why Dan Quinn saying the team didn't know about the Brandon McManus accusations until basically we did is the truth, and observations from Wednesday's OTA practice. But first, we're going to start this conversation with Jamin Davis on the edge. We got to see more of Jamin Davis preparing to be an edge rusher. We got to talk to him a little bit about it as well. So we're going to dive a little bit deeper into that situation. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create your account, use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. If you want to discuss this episode or anything else Washington Commanders related directly with me, if you got any questions or anything else you want to discuss, go become a Locked On Commanders insider today. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders and become a Locked On Commanders insider. From there, you can send direct messages to me via text message. All you got to do is enter a text message just like you do your family and your friends, and you got me right in the palm of your hands. I'll respond to you, content analysis, bonus content from time to time, and even more. All of it delivered straight to your phone. No need for hashtags, filters. You don't got to scroll. You don't got to swipe. No apps to download. Simply go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders and join the insider program today. Jamin Davis and Emmanuel Forbes are being, I wouldn't say moved around, but being utilized in different ways than they've been utilized before, at least in practice forms, right? Jamin Davis is getting a lot of reps on the edge. Emmanuel Forbes is getting some looks in the return game. But both of these situations are not necessarily the same. So this isn't really a mailbag situation, but we did get a YouTube comment on the episode that dropped on Tuesday night, Wednesday morning, depending on when you were able to catch that. And basically, that was the episode. We took a lot of comparisons from the Dallas Cowboys defense and kind of went to seek out the Washington Commanders equivalent, at least from a measurement standpoint, even if it doesn't turn out to be an equivalent from a production standpoint. And Jamin Davis, his comparison from the Dallas Cowboys was Micah Parsons. And it looks like from early coaching in the OTAs, that is the role that the Washington Commanders defense under Joe Whitt Jr. is going to largely be using him. We had a YouTube commenter who basically came through and said that when the head coach is talking about moving players around like Emmanuel Forbes, Jamin Davis, 2 first-round draft picks from the former regime of Ron Rivera, it's a very bad sign. So here's what I will say in essentially response to that. I totally get the mindset, and I don't necessarily disagree with anybody who has that mindset. Totally understand it. So I want to say that first and foremost, this isn't about arguing with the mindset, but it kind of took me down a path of thought that I thought would be very interesting for today's episode. And it honestly fits with me going out to practice Wednesday morning, looking at Jamin Davis, specifically also the rest of the defense, and then Joe Whitt Jr., defense coordinator, just so happened to be at the podium. Dan Quinn talked about Jamin. So it really all just kind of fit in together, and it just makes for a really good topic for today's episode. So here's what I want to say about Jamin. Jamin Davis is not being moved because this head coach or this coaching staff is just trying to figure out what to do with somebody else's first-round draft pick. Jamin Davis is being moved because his skill set fits the role in this defense that they need to fill. They don't have another Micah Parsons, quote-unquote, esque type of player on the roster. Frankie Louvu is not a Micah Parsons type player. Bobby Wagner certainly is not. Jordan McGee certainly is not right now. Could he develop into that type of guy? Sure, he certainly has some of the potential. KJ Henry, I don't know if he's got the athleticism and agility and short area quickness to do it, but he's kind of in that similar vein as well. So Jamin Davis really kind of fits that role. And if you go back every dayers to January, we started talking about what are some of the skills that these players can get or can emphasize. We actually talked about Jamon Davis leading into the NFL scouting combine. We actually, maybe February. So we actually talked about him and how good of an edge rusher he was in small samples, right? Jack Del Rio didn't really ever use him as a pass rusher as much as you probably should. But when Jamon got to play that pass rush role or got to play very aggressively against the run, the talent showed up. The short area quickness showed up, the agility, the aggression, all of that really showed up. And those were kind of the moments where Jamon was mostly at his best. When Jamon was at his worst, or when he looked a little bit, vulnerable, is when he's having to read and then react, when he's having to kind of play the offense, react to what they're doing, maybe key in on this guy, or he has 2 or 3 different assignments. If the running back doesn't leave, this is your key. If that key doesn't come through, this is your key. Those are the moments where Jamon Davis struggled. Basically, what I'm saying is Jamon Davis is built to go fast. And if you saw his press conference or some clips from his press conference on Wednesday, he's wearing Lightning McQueen shoes. And I know, given his history, that's not the most socially aware, I guess, choice of footwear, but it's all good. So Jamin Davis likes to go fast. He's at his best when he's going fast. And Joe Whitt Jr., defensive coordinator for your Washington Commanders, was asked about Jamin Davis working off the edge. And what Joe Whitt said was, quote, "He's a big, strong, fast man that has the ability to bend. We want to make sure we get our best players on the field in whatever capacity we can. We have a history of playing guys in positions that they may not normally be used to. We're just trying to build our best 11 guys on the field. And he's a big, fast, willing guy that's excited about doing it," end quote. Now, I can confirm that, one, from the press conference, but actually while Jamin Davis was waiting to step up to the mic for his press conference, I was actually on the side talking to him anyway. I told him, said, "Hey, bro, look, small sample size so far. Got to see you work on the edge a little bit. I think you look really good over there." And he said, "Yeah, thanks, man." And Jamin basically told me he feels really good, really excited for the opportunity. And when you watch him practice, which insiders, if you haven't already gotten it by the time you're watching or listening to this episode, you will be getting it soon. I got some practice footage that I'm going to put together in an insider-only video. We're going to send that out to you. So if you want in on that, again, join subtext.com/LockedOnCommanders. You'll get that bonus content as well. You're going to see Jamin Davis do some of these drills. There's actually one point where I'm filming the linebackers, because I try to give you as many looks as I can during limited videoing opportunities that we had at practice. But there's actually a segment where I'm actually filming the linebackers, but they're kind of taking almost, not really a break, but they're kind of between reps. And I kind of glanced over. I saw Jamin was about to do an edge rushing drill. So I actually panned the camera over real quick, got Jamin Davis coming off the edge. Then we went back to the linebackers. So I want to say when it comes to Jamin Davis, he's not being moved out of the traditional off-ball linebacker position because his coaching staff is like, no, we don't want him there. We got our own guys there. Let's see if he fits over here and just see if we can make something out of the first round pick. No, what I'm telling you is with Dan Quinn, and again, we go back to that scouting combine conversation. We talked about it before the scouting combine. At the scouting combine, we asked Dan Quinn about it, and what he mentioned watching Jamin Davis's tape, something he said that really stood out to me, got him excited, was his pass rushing ability. And again, this is a guy who pass rushed less than 70 times last year. So out of all the reps that Jamin Davis took, Dan Quinn took away from all those reps, the majority of which, 80% or so of which, were pass coverage, were off ball, were passive types of plays. What he took away from this is this dude is a really good pass rusher. We took away the same concept. So obviously I want him to be right, because if he's right, then I'm right. So I think that's really what this is actually about. I think they came into the offseason essentially looking at Jamin and saying, we have an edge rusher here. Well, if you have an edge rusher and you don't have David Mayo and you don't have Cody Barton and you don't have any of these other guys, you basically go into the offseason, you don't have linebackers, right? So what do the Washington Commanders go do? They go sign Bobby Wagner. They go sign Frankie Louvu. They go draft Jordan McGee. They go bring in linebackers because they didn't have linebackers. So the offseason approach also supports the theory that moving Jamin to the edge is not about, let's just see if he fits over here. No, moving Jamin to the edge was the plan in February. And you see the progression of that play executed in the moves that go forward. Dan Quinn on Jamin Davis, what he needs to see about him, out of him for coming to the next level. Dan Quinn said, quote, "At the end of the contract, or you're in a contract year, what Jamin Davis is, what does it look like? But more important, even that is like this improvement. We're really trying to push him specifically on the versatility. So you'll see him work some of the defensive line. You'll see him work with pass rush specialist Ryan Kerrigan on the side. And we're adding parts to his game that maybe we didn't use, and we're certainly trying to explore that. And so if that's something that he can add value for himself and for the team, then we'll dig in, and that'll take a while as well. That's not something that's in one practice or in 1 week to say, okay, it's there. Let's take time and work through it. I've been very impressed by his work ethic, and that is something look, every day, as you already know, I have been critical of Jamin Davis as much as probably anybody else has. I've even had some people tell me I just don't like Jamin, and that is not the case. I don't dislike Jamin Davis. Very excited about what he's going to potentially be able to do here. I asked him specifically about working with Coach Kerrigan. Like Coach Quinn said, he said Coach Kerrigan has been incredibly important to him. Look, this dude is getting coaching from the linebacking group, Ken Norton Jr. and his guys. He's getting coaching from the defensive line group, Ryan Kerrigan and his guys. And it's very impressive to see what they're trying to do with them. And look, if it comes to fruition, it's going to be very, very exciting. So Jamin Davis, I don't put in that category. I don't think this is a coaching staff that's just trying to figure out where to put someone else's first round pick. Emmanuel Forbes, he might be in a little bit of a different situation, and his career might be in a little bit of a different circumstance. We'll talk about that next, coming up on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And we're going to do that thanks to our friends over at BetterHelp. This next segment is brought to us by our sponsor, BetterHelp. Sometimes we all need the opportunity to get something off our chest. Big or small, certain things can really start to get to you. It's important that you let that stuff out, especially to someone who's maybe a little bit more unbiased or a little bit further away from the situation. So today, I want to kind of continue a conversation we had on yesterday's episode. I told you all yesterday that as excited as I get about EA Sports college football video game getting ready to come out, I get frustrated with the Madden development team for some of the things like the wear and tear injury system coming out in this year's college game. Super excited to see how that works. Super excited about the fact that if your quarterback's throwing arm gets impacted during a sack or a QB hit, it could impact the rest of your game, because that's what happens on Saturdays and Sundays. We're going to see it on Saturdays in the game. Maybe eventually we'll see it on Sundays in the game. Just like stressors, triggers can be different, and therapy can be different for everyone. So it's important to get things off your chest. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be flexible and suited to your schedule. So visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon and get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Thanks again for making Locked On Commanders your first listen or first view today and every day. Everydayers, thanks for coming through like you do. Come back tomorrow. We're going to wrap up the week. We are having conversations with assistant coaches and position coaches in Ashburn. So, we're going to ask Ryan Kerrigan about Jamin Davis coming off the edge and a bunch of other things. So we'll come back tomorrow. We'll have a lot of conversations with those coaches. In the meantime, make sure you're checking out Locked On Sports Today. It is a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every single day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. So whether you're watching this at night when it drops, whether you're watching this in the morning after it drops, in the afternoon, or you're watching it in Thursday evening, waiting for the next episode to drop as well, whatever you're watching it in between time, you've got sports content thanks to Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So while Jamin Davis, in my opinion, is being moved to the edge because this coaching staff observed, analyzed, and saw there's potential for him to fill a specific role, which comes off the edge in our defense under defensive coordinator Joe Whitt Jr. and under the guidance of head coach Dan Quinn. Emmanuel Forbes is in a little bit different situation. For one, he's not being moved around. Emmanuel Forbes is not getting slot snaps. He's not getting safety snaps. And truthfully, he's not a slot defender. He's not a safety. Emmanuel Forbes is an outside cornerback. That's what he's going to be in the NFL, if he's going to be anything in the NFL. He's getting some work, or he's gotten some work, I should say, looks as a punt returner potentially. Those looks have been very limited to simply fielding punts, because you can't tackle, you can't block, you can't hit, you can't really do a punt return, right? So basically we've seen him field some punts. It was certainly very interesting. But again, as far as the defense is concerned, he's an outside cornerback, period. He's in competition with Michael Davis to be the starting outside cornerback opposite Benjamin St-Juste. I do believe that Benjamin St-Juste, essentially, whether it's because this team just loves him in his evaluation or it's somewhat by default, I'll leave that opinion up to each individual person. But I think Benjamin St-Juste essentially has a job. And then Michael Davis and Emmanuel Forbes are battling it out for that second outside position. Right now, Emmanuel Forbes is getting a lot of the first team reps. I don't know that I would draw too much, resolution out of that fact, but it is a fact. So I'll share that with you. Something that Coach Whitt said about Emmanuel Forbes when asked about him was, quote, "I've seen a young man that is every day getting better, getting used to my hard coaching. He's a kid that has a really good skill set. And just like the rest of the young guys, he's out there working his butt off. And I've been pleased with him," end quote. And I will tell you this, like going back to last year's coaching staff, teammates, just members of the organization, nobody has ever called Emmanuel Forbes lazy, right? So understand that at least, for as much as it is worth, right, in the National Football League, which it's a production-based business and a results-based business, so effort is not what you get paid for. But we can at least tell you that Emmanuel Forbes is giving everything he's got to making this thing work, no matter what the system is, no matter what the scheme is. Now, on working with Forbes and what he's been doing, Coach Whitt did say he's going to basically keep that between him and Emmanuel specifically. But he says, quote, one thing that I always would do, I'll look at every team's interviews and I'll try to pick here and there. They'll figure out how we play. Okay, but I can tell you that the kid is working his butt off and I'm pleased with where he is. I can tell you that 100% because if he wasn't, I'll tell you, I'm not going to come up here and BS anybody. All right, end quote. And Coach Whitt Jr., this is kind of part of his personality, right? So if you go back and watch his press conference, a lot of Commanders fans that were watching it live were very, very happy with the way he kind of approached the media, where the media, sometimes we ask open-ended questions, right? That's by design. We want to give you as much wiggle room within the context of the question to answer it your way and give us the information you want. Coach Whitt kind of wants more specific detail. What is it you're after here? And then I'll tell you if I'm going to give it to you. And Coach Whitt is leaning off of his own experiences, right? I go watch my opponent. I'm watching Washington Commanders press conferences. And when they say, yeah, we think our guys can really win in press coverage, he's saying, oh, hey, by the way, Dallas Cowboys offense, you might see a lot of press coverage because Washington Commanders just said this. Joe Whitt Jr. is not going to give any of that stuff away. So, but what he is talking about is Emmanuel Forbes giving that effort, putting in that effort to be the best perimeter cornerback that he can be. Dan Quinn talked about the outside cornerback position. Emmanuel Forbes specifically needing to have that athleticism, that length, and the ability to defend bigger receivers. And that is where some of these concerns are coming in. And that is where some of these concerns honestly can't be fully recognized or fully evaluated until we at least get pads on in training camp. And when you see Terry McLaurin go toe-to-toe aggressively with Emmanuel Forbes or Jahan Dotson or Luke McCaffrey or any of these other wide receivers. But here's the thing about Emmanuel Forbes that has drawn concerns, at least from me, about moving into this scheme and where he might fit. For one, when you have a blitz-heavy scheme up front, there are a couple of things that offenses like to do to really, really try to beat that, right? One is obviously screens, slants, drags, right? All your quick route passes. If you get the ball out quick, the fastest pass rusher is never going to touch your quarterback, right? But the other thing they like to do, especially, is double moves, because as a defensive back, you tend to get a little bit more aggressive when you know there's a blitz in front of you, because ideally, if the blitz gets home, the quarterback doesn't have as much time, which means you can anticipate a little bit better what the receiver is doing, what the quarterback is going to do. The problem with that is if your opponent picks up a blitz, so let's say I've got a left side, I've got two right side reads, I've got a short and I've got a double move going deep. As a quarterback, basically what I'm looking at is, all right, if the blitz comes from my right side, I'm looking right here at this linebacker, safety, whatever it is. If this dude comes, I need to identify one of two things. The blitz is coming and it's coming free. Get it to the quick route. The blitz is coming, but my guy's going to pick it up. Look for the double. Maybe even throw a pump at the quick, hit the double move. Emmanuel Forbes got beat by a lot of double moves last year. And he got beat by a lot of double moves last year while not playing in an incredibly aggressive defensive scheme that blitzes a lot up front. This defense wants to be aggressive. They want to blitz up front a lot. And that worries me a little bit now. Emmanuel Forbes is in his second year in the NFL. He's had time to work, think, study, prepare, right? So there's nothing that says that the way Emmanuel Forbes handled a lot of double moves last year is how he's going to handle it this year. But I haven't seen it yet, so that is my concern, number one. Number two, you got to bring up A.J. Brown, right? You hate to do it because who wants to have kind of their worst career moments brought up, constantly in the public eye. But when you talk about being able to defend bigger receivers, A.J. Brown is going to come up there. But there's other ones. CeeDee Lamb is not as big as A.J. Brown, but he's a bigger receiver than Emmanuel Forbes is. Defensive back. The New York Giants, they got a guy like Malik Neighbors out there. They got other players, right? You have to be able to compete with these bigger players. And unfortunately, in multiple situations, not just against A.J. Brown, we saw Emmanuel Forbes get pushed around, bullied, dominated physically, whatever you want to call it. We saw Devontae Smith moss Emmanuel Forbes, and that is not a player, Devontae Smith, who mosses a lot of people. For one, he's shorter than you, and he's kind of built similar to you. So even that, you have to be able to at least win against guys who are similarly built. If you're not, that's going to be a problem. I was asked about Emmanuel being a punter or kick returner. Here's what I'm going to tell you why I don't necessarily have a good feeling about Emmanuel Forbes being a punter or kick returner. It's not really about the size. It's more so about the aggression. Being a punt returner or kick returner, if you're going to be one of the best, if you're going to be a lethal return man, you've got to be incredibly aggressive. You've got to be willing to run through a hole that might shut as you're running through it. In college, and we kind of talk about this with tackling, right? In college tackling, someone put it to me like this once, where in college, if you're being tackled or you're going up against physical players, you're possibly playing against dudes who are going to be accountants next season, right? In the NFL, you're playing against NFL players. Like every single player on the field is an NFL player. In college, maybe one or two is an NFL player. And Emmanuel Forbes, how many NFL receivers did he face off against in his time? How many NFL linebackers did he run straight into in his time? Not very many. So I don't necessarily see the traits and that willingness to be that aggressive, almost a little bit reckless with your body from Emmanuel Forbes. Now, again, when the pads come on, we're going to learn a lot more. But I basically equated to in college, it's like taking an 85 mile per hour changeup to the quad, which you can do. And in the NFL, it's like taking a 100 mile an hour fastball to the ribs. It's a little bit different. And I don't know that Emmanuel Forbes is up for that challenge. I've seen a lot of return specialists who fall on the ground, run out of bounds immediately. That's not the guy you want back there fielding your kicks if you can handle it or if you can have it as a choice. So again, Emmanuel Forbes, I think, is in a much different situation. And I'm just not quite sure where he fits with this style, this scheme, and this defense. But we will continue to keep an eye on that and figure it out. Something that we're not going to have to keep an eye on, Brandon McManus, released by the Washington Commanders. They brought in a new kicker. Dan Quinn addressed his understanding and knowledge of the situation surrounding their former kicker. We'll talk about that next, coming up on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode of Locked On Commanders brought to you by Game Time. Game Time makes getting NBA Finals tickets even faster and easier because prices on the Game Time app are actually dropping the closer it gets to tip-off. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. The cheapest ticket for Game 1 of the NBA Finals has dropped. When we started the week, it was $584. Now it is $551. Like we said, closer gets to tip-off, the cheaper the tickets get. With the best value for your money is also cheaper, $1,841 to get you into Section 3, Row B. Your row is so close to the court, you're not even using numbers, you're using letters. And you can get a preview of the action because Game Time shows you the view of your seat before you even buy it. So take the guesswork out of buying NBA Finals tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create your account, use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create your account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Commanders, and we knew that Dan Quinn was going to be asked about the kicker situation because he has to be asked about the kicker situation. They did sign a new kicker. We talked about in yesterday's episode. We saw him in practice. He made all of his field goals, at least that I could tell. I believe he made all of his field goals. I didn't chart them, I'll be honest with you, but I believe he made all of his field goals for whatever that's worth. Again, insiders, the practice footage that I'm going to send you has footage of him making one or two field goals. Can't remember if I got two of them on tape or just one. But obviously Dan Quinn was asked just about the release of Brandon McManus and if he could talk about kind of why the decision was made to release the kicker. So Dan Quinn said, I think number one, I think you guys would all understand that this is under investigation. So I can't comment a lot, but what I can say is a little bit about what I told the team. And I think like most things, not necessarily related to this, but as a lesson, let's make sure you always let somebody know and tell them. There's usually a whole bunch of people that want to be a part of the solution. So when you have that, whether that's for this team or any team or a parent, that kind of communication allows you to come up with some solutions. So like I said, not specific to this, but it was just a good lesson to always have that conversation. It's usually much more difficult in your head than it is really having the actual conversation. And so just wanted to make sure I got a lesson out of the guys as we're going through it. So we did release Brandon. I found out some of the information on May 27th, and then we released him on June 3rd. He was asked a follow-up question on if he was aware of the allegations before signing Brandon McManus. Coach Quinn reiterated, quote, the first time I learned of the allegation was May 27th, end quote. So here's, and you know, there's a natural distrust of people in these types of positions, right? And then when you double it down with it's the Washington Commanders, people have even more distrust. But here's something that I think we all have to remember in context, right? Dan Quinn was not part of that Washington Commanders group. Adam Peters was not part of that Washington Commanders group, and Brandon McManus wasn't part of that Washington Commanders group and didn't do this with the Washington Commanders. This is a Jacksonville Jaguars problem. When it became a Washington Commanders problem is when the Washington Commanders became aware of the allegations. Well, when did they become aware of the allegations? According to Dan Quinn, May 27th. Why do I believe him? Here's why I believe him. Because Dan Quinn, go back to his introductory press conference, right? What did Dan Quinn really hammer into all of us in his introductory press conference? That he has been waiting, biding his time, itching, biting at the chance to get his second opportunity to be an NFL head coach. His reputation is based on team building. It's based on trust. It's based on leadership and communication. So I don't think one of the first moves that he is going to allow to happen as a head coach. Because believe me, Adam Peterson say, we're going to sign this kicker. And Dan Quinn says, hey, dude, he's pending sexual assault allegations. I don't want him on my roster. You got a problem here. I don't think Adam Peterson is going to do it either. But bottom line is the message that these guys have been sending all offseason. If they bring in a guy then that they know has these allegations, understand this. If they know it as a staff, the players know it. And if the players know it, and the players know that you signed the guy who has this stuff waiting to happen, and that this is going to come to a head eventually, but you signed him anyway, all this stuff that you've been spouting off all of season, you've lost your locker room. You literally lost your locker room already. So none of it fits. None of it actually makes any sense. And, and Brandon McManus, I mean, look, did he know about the allegations coming in? Probably. The attorney for the two flight attendants that are following the suit said that they've been trying to talk with his team and with the Jacksonville Jaguars, and they've been met with nothing but arrogance that reminds them of the Deshaun Watson case. So Brandon McManus, probably knew that this was going on. Did he admit it to Adam Peters and to Dan Quinn? No. And I think that's what Dan Quinn is talking about in this quote. Again, he said, you'd have a number that there's usually a whole bunch of people want to be a part of the solution, but the kind of communication allows you to come up with it. So again, and he's saying in general, not necessarily speaking about this specifically, but again, read between the lines. Communication is the key. Hiding bad news does not make it better, right? Bad news has never aged very well with time. So I think at the end of the day, I think we can believe that Dan Quinn, Adam Peters, and the organization did not know about this when they signed him, did not know about this till it became news, or if at the most, like maybe got a slight heads up, compared to say the media and everybody else, that this thing was being filed when it was being filed. But either way, Brandon McManus no longer part of the team. They have a new kicker. They basically all but confirmed again that there's going to be camp competition at the kicker position. We do, I say we as loosely as some people in the media, mostly me, expected to be Jake Bates of the Michigan Panthers, who competes in the UFL playoffs this weekend. So if you want to watch that game, if you want Jake Bates in Washington before the end of next week's minicamp or for next week's minicamp, then you want the Birmingham Stallions to win. Ironically, the Birmingham Stallions, the team who cut the current Washington Commanders kicker. So there you go. A whole lot of UFL ties in there. But of course, we'll be back to talk about all that next week. But tomorrow coming up, we're going to talk about some things that we learned from the assistant and position coaches after we get to talk to them in Ashburn, Virginia tomorrow. So come back for that. In the meantime, if you got questions or comments, throw them in the YouTube comment section or text me directly as a Locked On Commanders insider. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders to do that today. Don't forget to check out Locked On Sports, first ever 24/7 live streaming sports channel on YouTube. And as always, thank you for making Locked On Commanders your first listen or your first view today and every day, everydayers. Thanks for coming through like you do. So until we speak again, if you're out and about, please be safe, be kind, and I'll see you next time for another episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.